and understand. And look at, for example, Fatima uz-Zahra as a wife. Look at her. Imam Ali says, one of my greatest desires with Fatima uz-Zahra was for me to listen to her, for her to give me a demand. She never demanded anything. They say before her departure, she asked for pomegranate. Imagine. He said, I was so happy to hear that my wife wants something from me. That was how simple she was. What does that mean for us? Let us train our children to have little expectations in the world, to have expectations for the love of Allah, and to be the type of a person whose expectations are minimal, not high demands. Fatima uz-Zahra was like that. Imagine when I travel, for example, to Africa, in countries where we have servants, the way we deal with our servants is not within the Sharia many times. We take them because we pay them meager salaries because they're in need. We use them like slaves. This is not in Islam. Not in Islam. Look at Fidda. Fidda was a maid who gave her life to Ahlul Bayt. She used to cook one day, and Fatima uz-Zahra salamullahi alayhi used to cook another day. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine a maid is given that balance of a day off every other day? Where would you see such people? There are very few people in the world who practice this Islam. People like, I'll give you an example. I read a story of Rajabali. I don't know if you've heard of him in Iran. A very learned man passed away. It's not in the book Elixir of Love. Look at the logic of Islam. Look at this man following Ahlul Bayt. He was so in love with Allah that he was a landlord. He owned an apartment. Poor man. He was actually a khayyat. He was a tailor. And he had a taxi driver who was living with him. He was renting one room. This is Islam that we need to practice, but many times we don't see it. That's why we wonder why the world is not majority Islam. Believe me, it's in our hands. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has endowed the human race with sufficient power to take His message across, but we limit ourselves. Rajabali Khayyat, historically, when this man got married, he had a child. When he got a child, Rajabali Khayyat went to the man and said, your rent just went down. I lowered your rent. He reduced his rent. The man said, how? I have an additional person in my house now. How did you reduce my rent? He says, your expenses have increased. So I can't burden you. Look, subhanAllah. Now you might say, how can I be a landlord and reduce my rent? The point is that Rajabali Khayyat would probably afford it, but the point was, he's participating in the giving, in the sacrificing and bringing stability. This man was so touched by this akhlaq. This is how our Ahlul Bayt were. They were so giving and so forgiving. وَالْكَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظَ وَالْعَافِينَ عَنِ النَّاسِ. They're the ones, they held back their anger and they kept forgiving. Fidda serves one day, Fatima uz-Zahra serves another day. Imam Ali used to do the outdoor work, she used to do the indoor work. Imagine this balance. Then when we look at our social problems today in society, and we find the divorce rates are so high, and we find so many social problems, when we examine it, often it is by our own hands. Believe me. And if we examine these kinds of qualities, and it's idealistic for me to sit up here and mention Ahlul Bayt, but at the end of the day, I truly believe if we make a genuine effort to follow their pathway, we will never be like them. Let's not fool ourselves. But if we get close to them, imagine the benefits. And the Prophet is saying, we are the Ark of Noah. Join us and keep close to us. Don't stay far behind us, for you will sink and die. And don't try to go ahead of us. You will die. Just be right behind us, for Allah has endowed us, has authorized us to lead all of you. So tonight's celebration of Fatima uz-Zahra on the basis of sacrifice is a given proof that if we examine just the rationale of sacrifice and proving our love for the goodness, there is no greater example than Ahlul Bayt. And let us make that effort tonight and always. That what can I do as we leave this place? What can I do to give more of what I have? I admire there was a man who came to me, a very wealthy man, and he gives a lot of donations. And he says to me, I'm very worried. I said, why are you worried? He said, Allah has made my life very easy. I have everything in my hands. I'm worried. I said, subhanAllah, the fact that you are worried is a great gift of Allah. For you are not lost. You are worried. He says, I go to sleep at night thinking, what am I going to do for that poor child who's dying as an orphan in Africa. I am living so comfortably. What am I doing for that child? I said, this is a great mercy. Whatever it translates to tomorrow is going to translate. But the very fact that you have this concern is sufficient as a starting point, as a catalyst for you to do something good. You woke up one morning, you call me, he says, I can't sleep. I had a dream, I see this child in Africa on a roof, screaming towards me in my dream. He says, I must go and help. He's, mashallah, very active in Africa today, doing all types of well digging and building projects. See, that's sacrifice. It's a positive kind of sacrifice. He's a wealthy businessman, successful, can enjoy, can go on vacation. He says, no. Life has no meaning if I don't do this. I said, subhanAllah, what a ni'mah, what a rahmah. When we examine these characters, you will see all these characters that are the ultimate. You will see them in our blessed Imams in our days. Imam alayhi salam never used to go home with money. He would earn so much wealth that by the time he gets home, he has no money. To that point that he made sure the poor felt at home. That when they came to eat at home, he looked like the poorest man. Upon his death, you find there was a person who was crying and said there was a man who used to come and wash me. He is not showing up anymore. And Imam Hassan says to me, was my father. These are the kinds of people who are imams, chosen people, who are sacrificing their lives. Brothers and sisters, these kinds of celebrations and commemorations better lead to positive transactions, to successes, and let us be good role models for our children. They can look at us as good representatives of the way Ahlul Bayt should be followed. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil.
May Allah give this community success. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give this ummah, or this generation especially, sufficient stamina to represent Islam properly in the West. The society, the West, is in great need of guidance. Great need. You will be surprised. And it is a very simple solution. I mean, I am on the forefront at universities speaking at different locations around the country. And the need, the desire to learn and to know the truth is so intensive. I'm wondering, like, what are we doing for this cause? People are joining wrong religions. They're joining wrong cult groups, looking for solutions. We have the solution. And then when these institutions are built, they should be the kinds of institutions that invite people in the pathway of Allah, not only within our community. For of course charity begins at home. We need to save our own ummah. But the way we save our ummah is also to empower them in how to articulate and to represent Islam properly. Otherwise that metaphysical dimension of submissiveness to Allah is meaningless. For us to be just, rotating creatures who do nothing for no meaning, or when we do it we don't understand much, it's a useless act. So let's take ourselves to a higher dimension and ask ourselves, when we go to sleep at night, what should I do? What can I do? And it may appear like a small thing, but never underestimate a step for Allah. Never underestimate. I've seen great people who have performed great things in society.